Revelers, this is Off the Rails, Right versus Left, the podcast that we do because we think the left is evil. I'm Rob D.
And I'm Brad Lee.
And I'm Brian G.
And we are Off the Rails, Right versus Left. Again, we're doing this show because we think everybody needs to know that the left is evil.
Classic.
Oh, this should have come down. All right. Well, welcome, Revelers. This is Off the Rails, Right versus Left. And I'm continuing my series of much more mild-mannered interviews that I've been doing going into the 2024 election, meeting with candidates and talking with them a little bit that are from smaller parties or from races that don't get as much attention. So today, I'm as again, y'all know I'm a libertarian, so I'm absolutely thrilled to get the opportunity to speak with Girish Altekar. I'm sure he's going to correct me if I got the name wrong. He is the Libertarian candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, the Texas 37th Congressional District. Let's go ahead and bring Girish on. Mr. Altekar, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Again, like I was explaining to you in the chats that we had going into the interview, like we're kind of like beholden to this two-party system that our founders never intended, and we kind of got to break through it because now we kind of have a race between two different parties that both think they can spend your money better and control your life better. So I think it's time to return the liberty back to the United States of America. So did I get your name right? Girish Altekar?
Yeah, it's Girish Altekar.
Okay, so it's close
enough.
So
yes.
I've got 5 languages, but Hindi's not one of them, so my pronunciation over there is not very good. So well, go ahead and give yourself a little introduction here, and more importantly, why you're running, because you're in that district over by Austin, right?
Yes.
So you're kind of in like a Democrat stronghold trying to take on the system. So yeah, definitely want to hear what inspired you to run.
Sure. So first of all, I've lived in Austin for about 35 years or so. And so I consider myself a Texan more than even from India. I have been a libertarian for almost since about 94, so that makes it about 30 odd years. And even though I was not very active politically in terms of elections or even being part of the party, I have been from the outside donating to campaigns, donating to candidates, and so on and so forth. And I've had my own business, technology services business here in Austin for a long time. So that's what I have been doing. And until recently, when I'm sort of semi-retired and the Republican legislature jacked up the filing fees, there were fewer and fewer candidates for libertarians to run in Texas.
Yeah, how much is the filing fee now, just in case anybody out there wants to join a race come 2026? Like, I believe I'm going to be running for my district to try and remove Pete Sessions in the 2026 midterms.
Great. So there was a little bit of arm twisting, but I also thought it was my turn to sort of run, throw my hat in the ring, and see what I could do with my own ideas. And that was the incentive to run. I am under no illusion, no doubt that about the outcome of the race. But I thought if I approached the citizens as one on one with and talking to them about what libertarians stand for, what is the moral component of that philosophy, what is the utilitarian component of that philosophy, that I would get, I would have it reflected in the results. And that's sort of my hope. I have been I've been campaigning where people are, where Austinites are, which is, hike and bike. I don't know if you know much about Austin, but there is a hike and bike trail here,
Mm-hmm.
and people exercise there. There are several farmers markets in town where people congregate every weekend. So I've been going there and hanging out my shingles and handing out my cards and talking to people. And even surprising to me, I think it has been very effective. I've met, at least 4 to 6 thousand people in the last 3 4 months, and we shall see if it reflects in the results. And so my goal is to at least get into double digits here. Um, and there is a Republican candidate, but I'm not quite sure she's even campaigned at all. Um, so we shall see. But
Well,
that's sort of,
I'm definitely rooting for you. I'm always rooting for the libertarian. Now, I have
yeah.
done
So
I've done some other interviews with libertarian candidates for the Senate and for the House. So, like some of the big issues with like economy and healthcare, Supreme Court, we have gotten some degree of look at that. But because you are there in one of the bigger cities in Texas, I want to like start off with an issue that's kind of like huge in large cities pretty much around the country right now, and that's like the violent crime and vagrancy that just seems out of control. If you get into Congress, how would you be proposing to tackle that?
yeah, I mean, I think Austin, just like any other major city, is experiencing growth in homelessness and possibly uh, as a result the increase in crime. But there's also a lot of petty crime. And I'm not sure that there is a magic bullet solution to this. There is something tearing at our fabric. I'm running mostly as an economic libertarian, where I believe that if you let libertarian ideas thrive, the country will become more prosperous and harmonious. And if that's the case, then I think that addresses at least some of the root causes of, uh, certainly not the root causes of major violence like burglary and stuff like that. I'm not quite sure that Austin is afflicted with that, but at least a lot. If people are wealthier, then they are happier and prosperous, and therefore less uh, induced towards crime, and that's sort of where I lean towards. I'm not a law and order. I mean, I don't understand how law and order works, other than put more police on the streets. And there have been some of that also, where a lot of the police officers have been taken off, and or at least they are not doing policing effectively for whatever reason. So some of those ideas also need to be thought through. Does
So
that
no, my question is, do you really think that it's about effective policing, or is it about effective prosecution? Because again, you got a very entrenched I'm not even going to say liberal, but leftist elite in Austin, especially as it becomes a backup option for a lot of these tech companies. We're getting a lot of the like uber leftists out of California. And like I don't know if you know exactly where Austin, for example, ranks. I mean, obviously you're going to be representing all of Texas in Congress, but we've got three major cities that are in the bottom half for safety ratings in the US. And I think the one thing that seems to me to be consistent is a lack of prosecution of violent crime, and that's whether it's the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the Austin area, or Houston and San Antonio as well. The crime rates are up, but prosecutions are down, and it seems to me that like we've got to take some sort of approach to ensure the prosecution of people that are violent criminals. There's a big focus on criminal justice reform and rights for the criminals, but in that it's getting lost the rights of the victims.
Well, by effective policing, I meant that there are lines that police officers have drawn that, unless it is a violent crime of this nature, they will not intervene. They don't come out when somebody reports a petty theft. And again, it's not something that that's what I meant when I said effective policing. I think that somehow we have reached a point, whether it is because of whether it's because we are not compensating police officers enough, or whether not enough of them, or whatever, that they believe that a lot of petty crime they will not deal with unless there is hurt, unless there is threats of injury and so on and so forth. They don't even show up, which and that's what I meant by ineffective policing. And I think I'm the proponent of the broken windows theory, and so therefore, unless we prevent these windows from being broken, we'll continue to be afflicted with the conditions that we find ourselves in.
Okay.
The prosecution.
Can you see the graphic I brought up on the screen here?
Yeah.
So this is from crimegrade.com. They just collect the government reported data and kind of like assimilate it. I mean, you can kind of see like how much of Austin has now fallen into an F crime grade for violent crime, and like your homes like got robberies going on. Crime occurs every 6 minutes on average in the Austin area. And like part of that state and local enforcement, but like my question, how do you think we on a national level, because it's not just the Austin area or Houston or any of these others that this is an issue. It's gotten to be an issue all over the country. So do you think we can maybe from the federal level require at least some categories of crime are required to be prosecuted, and maybe at the same time shore up the right to a speedy trial? Because a lot of these things, they go and arrest the people, lock them up, leave them there for months and months and months, and then never prosecute the crimes, and then just end up dismissing the case.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, it's not being. I'm not an expert on law enforcement, so I'm not quite certain about what the root causes are or what the solutions are. But yeah, I mean, I think clearly prosecution is one of the tools that people use to. I mean, if you're not punishing people for taking matters into their own illegal hands, then you're clearly not doing your job. So like I said, I mean, I believe in law and order. I believe in the deterrence of punishment, but what exactly is happening in Austin is not, or other major cities. I don't know.
So it's something you're going to have to look at more as you get into office, how we can address that.
Yeah.
Without pouring more government funds into it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can militarize the police, which we are doing already anyway. But is that the right solution, or is it are the problems related to education, not sufficient opportunities for jobs and work?
Well, there's actually an interesting statistic. 70% of prisoners came from a single parent family home. So, like, I think supporting, upholding, and encouraging family values is a huge place to start. But I want to go ahead and move on to the gun policy. Again, you're here in Texas. We had the mass shooting in Uvalde, so that's kind of like top of mind. But we've also on the flip side, we've had a couple like attempts at mass shootings where a bystander carrying a gun actually ended the attempted mass shooting before it ever got started. One was at a convention, one was at a shopping center. So where do you stand as far as gun policy in the United States?
I'm a pro Second Amendment guy. I don't, and it's quite funny because I don't. um, it's another area where I don't have a gun myself because I just don't find myself to be trained enough in its use. So I've never bothered to get one. But I believe in Second Amendment purely from sort of the philosophical point of view that says guns in the hands of individuals prevent um, a statist or an authoritarian government. And so from that point of view, I'm a Second Amendment guy. Whether or not they, and like you said, if the citizenry is armed, it's quite likely that they will prevent that they'll prevent other people with sort of the bad apples with guns from doing tremendous harm. I believe in that. So I'm all for laws that allow citizenry to have guns on them in their possessions, in their houses, or even for open or concealed carry.
Right. So there's I kind of like to do this like every time I'm ever talking about gun rights, and that's like pull up the actual verbiage of the Second Amendment because it does stand apart from the other bills, other bills in the Bill of Rights where it seems to be granting a freedom. Whereas the verbiage of the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, which would be like if you go back to the time of the founders, what was the regulated militia? That was just citizens that had guns that they were able to bring into a military apparatus and regulate them to fight our enemies. Not that they were part of a national guard or a standing army, because we didn't have a standing army. And even up until probably for the first like 50 or 60 years of our country, we didn't have a standing army. So the idea was that the average citizen could help in times of crisis. But it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This does not instill a right. It just says the right exists. And this amendment does not grant anything to the citizens. It restricts the government. Now, the reason I like to share that, like my libertarian perspective on it, is anything that doesn't affect other people, the government doesn't have any right to control. If you as a person are not interfering with the rights of other Americans to live a free and safe life, then your behavior should not be regulated by a government.
Sure.
So I actually take issue with the gun laws that we already have established. And the reason I take issue with that is, like, you take the NFA, for example, it prohibits the manufacture of fully automatic weapons for civilians, which was allowed up until 1976. And we didn't have mass shootings. So all it really did is made it to where criminals still have fully automatic weapons and rich people can still have fully automatic weapons because it's not illegal for them to own them. They just have to pay extra money to the federal government that the federal government can use because it goes to the ATF. So then the ATF gets to target American citizens. So I have a little bit of an issue of funding a government to attack its citizens. And then because they refuse the manufacturing, now the average price if you want to purchase a fully automatic gun is about $40,000 to $50,000. So what they really did, I think, not just from the Second Amendment aspect, but also the equal protection under the law, I think is violated with our current gun policy, because what it really does is it creates, the upper class is allowed to have it, but the lower class isn't. which I think is an attack on the fundamental freedoms, even beyond the concept of the Second Amendment.
Right, to the extent that, I mean, every government intrusion increases the price of whatever that's being purchased or sold. So there's no question about that. And to the extent that that applies also to automatic weapons, we are all up in arms, so to speak, about that. But yeah, I mean, I do not believe in um, in giving any quarter on this issue to the government. I think people owning guns is fine. There are, um, I mean, there are real concerns about why we have so many mass shootings. And again, what is the root cause? Is it just mental health? What can be done about it?
I think there's a fair argument that it's just mental health, because back, 40, 50 years ago, when kids would go to school with guns in their gun rack and their pickup so they could go hunting after school, there were no mass shootings. There's mass shootings now where they're doing mass shootings in gun-free zones with guns they're not legally allowed to own. And 90% of the time, these are kids that were identified as being troubled anyways. The FBI, in a lot of cases, has already interviewed them and knew that they were a threat, but no serious actions were taken. Which it's funny that they worry about the people that are dangerous' rights, but then they're willing to take away the rights of people that aren't doing anything wrong and aren't showing danger signs. So yeah. So my question as a libertarian, like, if I run and it hasn't been done already, I would be proposing to scrap the NFA and any and all restrictions as a complete violation of constitutional rights. How do you feel about that idea?
Sorry, what is NFA? I mean, I don't know.
The National Firearms Act. So it originally started in 1919, basically had some of the bigger explosives banned. And then in 1979, that's when they started getting rid of firearms and stuff. And now that's the NFA is what they use when they like instituted their quote unquote assault weapons ban. That was what they used as justification for it being constitutional. And I think under the we had the liberal Supreme Court for, 70 years. So any serious challenge to it hasn't come. And I think now that we have a constitution respecting Supreme Court, now would be a good time to make a move on legislation where if it gets challenged and taken all the way to the Supreme Court, we're going to get it ruled on by judges that are focused on the Constitution and not judges that want to legislate from the bench.
Sure. Again, like I said, my campaign is all about economic libertarianism in today, and so I'm pro Second Amendment, but it's not something that I'm leading with. Just like law and order is not something I'm leading with. I'm leading with economic issues that allow every American to prosper, to do things for themselves, to not have the government put roadblocks in their way. And those are the issues. So if I get elected, those are sort of the issues that I would primarily put forth as the ones that I want to deal with first.
Okay, so what would be some of the bills that you would put forward to free us up from an economic standpoint?
Yeah. So, for example, the issue of licensure is a big one for me. I think there are so many vulnerable people who cannot make a living just because they haven't gone to the school and gotten a license or a certificate in something that they could ordinarily just easily provide for their fellow people. If they provide it free, you can do that. But the moment you ask for a payment for those services, then you have to go ahead and get a license. To me, that's sort of nonsense, and it's something that we should rescind across the country. Even though these are small, relatively small local issues, but that's sort of the culture that I want to promote. There's also the civil forfeiture, which takes using which the law enforcement can simply confiscate your property without giving you a reason to do that. And if you're going with $10,000 in cash to purchase a car at an auction or whatever the need may be, that they should not be able to confiscate your money without giving you an explanation, and the onus is therefore on you to justify that money wasn't used in drug trade.
Okay, and for my audience to clarify what he's talking about the forfeiture laws that were generally intended to target organized crime and drug dealing apparatus, where if they charge you with a crime, notice I say charge, not convict. If they charge you with a crime, they're able to seize your assets, both cash, property, boats, cars, houses.
No, they don't even have to charge you with the crime. I mean,
yeah.
In many cases, they don't even have to charge you with the crime, and it's a complete travesty.
Yeah, but the point is, they're able to seize your property without any sort of conviction that you did anything wrong.
Correct.
And then they wrote the laws, so you have to prove how you got the money. You have to prove that you're innocent, even though, like, most of the time they have your financial records, but you have to prove that you're innocent in order to get your property back. And that's a violation of our due process, because in this country, we're presumed innocent until proven guilty. And for the government to be able to levy penalties on you when you haven't been proven guilty of anything is completely unconstitutional. So I think that's exactly the thing that he's talking about. And yeah, they can just assert it. There's corridors where in some states, I think Massachusetts has one of them, where they just line up the cops and they catch travelers, and if the travelers has a bunch of cash on them, they say that they're working transporting. They don't even necessarily charge. They'll issue a bench ticket for them to appear in court and seize all their assets. Well, once they have control of the assets, it's on the onus of the citizen to prove that they weren't doing anything wrong. And like, the whole reason we've got an innocent until proven guilty system is because it's impossible to prove that you're innocent, and the burden's on the government to prove that there's no reasonable way to explain that you were, or to explain something happened legally and lawfully. You know, the government's the one that's supposed to have that burden, not the citizen. And then the fees and whatnot, they kind of run a balancing act where they try and make it to where what they seized, it would cost you more to get the item back, so you just give up on it and let them have it.
Well, thankfully, there are people who are fighting this. I don't know if you've heard of Institute of Justice, and there are the people who are actually taking these guys to court and winning these court cases. So perhaps that tide will turn, but certainly if I and other libertarians are elected in Congress, perhaps we can do something about the civil forfeiture.
Yeah,
laws.
well, I mean, I hope so, but for the same like the ACLU is a good reason why you never trust non-government organizations that are sitting there talking about freedoms and liberties, because they tend to end up twisting things to where they target their own targets eventually, which is what the ACLU has done now. It used to be about civil liberties, and now they're attacking people for trying to press their own civil liberties. So I see that as being an issue too. I don't trust the NGOs, especially these NGOs that get so much of their money from federal grant programs and such. Like, it's very. I'm very highly skeptical.
That's fine. The Institute of Justice is somebody I donate to. They are an independent organization that helps people with actual court cases that infringe on their liberties. So slightly different, but I get your point. I mean,
okay. So then I want to move into a little broader picture, since you're looking at being in Congress. Our tax policy is ridiculous, and the lies that you see politicians say about our tax policy, like quotes from the Democratic Party about making billionaires pay their fair share when they pay 90% of the taxes, and the top 10% pays 99% of the taxes. Most of the people whining for the rich to pay their fair share are literally paying no taxes. They're getting refunds with no contributions to the tax rolls at all.
Yes. Um, one of the things that one of my pet ideas, and it's not my idea, other people have spoken about it before, is to eliminate the whole tax system and replace it by tax on a postcard uh, kind of a method. So the idea there is if you so you always will have a choice. You can either fill out the 1040 and all of the associated forms and everything, or you could just put your income on a postcard. There'll be 3 lines. Here's your total income. Here's your tax rate. Here's your tax. And if you do that, then you simply mail in the amount of tax owed, and you're done. You don't. So there are a couple of things that are beneficial about it. You don't have to waste hours, thousands and thousands and thousands of that's hyperbole, many hours in trying to prepare the tax return, trying to figure out what receipts you have, trying to figure out if you're violating any laws or whatever. You simply say, this is your income, this is your tax rate, effective tax rate, here's your tax. The second benefit of all of that is the tax code is a very pernicious method of imposing social and other economic policies on citizens. And the moment you say we are moving away from a tax code that to a simple form like the postcard, what you do is eliminate the power of all the lobbyists and the and politicians to pervert our system into things that benefit their own people and at the expense of others. So, in that sense, it's a libertarian principle, and it's not just a tax simplification for the sake of tax simplification. It reduces government interference in our lives just by the virtue of the fact that more and more people would, my belief is, automatically switch towards a postcard based system. And therefore, everything that sort of the lobbying for specific tax provisions will go by the wayside eventually.
Yeah, well, and then you have to throw in there, okay, so because of the complicated tax system, we're approaching 90,000 employees of the IRS. They have an average salary of $75,000 a year, which is more than the average American makes by far. So it's kind of ridiculous. And what's their job? Their job is to rob people, because if you don't pay your taxes, what do? Guys with guns come and take it.
That's right.
So, I mean, that's by definition robbery. Now, I did have a different perspective on how taxes work, because I did live in Russia for a couple years. Now, in Russia, they have a 15% tax rate across the board. If you profit as a company, 15% tax rate. As an independent person, all your income sources, 15% tax rate. Everybody pays the same amount. I think like the bottom like 5% of earners are exempted from taxes, and everybody else pays their tax. Obviously, retirements and pensions and all that, none of that is taxed, because by that point, you're done. Like, you're supposed to be able to just enjoy your retirement. You shouldn't be funding the government at that point.
Yeah, the double taxation issue.
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
Money gets taxed twice, thrice, 4 times.
Well, not really for most of the retirement plans, because the money's put in pre-tax to begin with. But but then they still like come and like overly try and attack those that income that was like it was tax deferred anyways. But I think it should be tax exempt. It would encourage people. I think it'd do a better job of encouraging people to take care of their own retirements, especially since Social Security was supposed to be a safety net for the lowest wealth Americans and not something that everybody gets. That's part of the reason why our system's insolvent. It's the reason why our Medicare is insolvent. Well, that and, the Biden-Harris administration taking $290 billion out of Medicare to pay for their EV tax credit, their EV credits, because nobody but Tesla can make a profitable electric vehicle. And we shouldn't be subsidizing that kind of stuff. So like if I'm proposing the legislation to be 15% tax rate across the board, the only write-off that companies have is I would say for education programs, if they pay employees to attend education programs to get them, professional certifications, advanced training, even like job programs, like some of these manufacturing, you might need a bunch of welders, so you need to send people to welding school. Let the companies write that off because it directly contributes to the tax force. So then it just comes down to 100% what are their profits. And if the companies want to get out of taxes, the only way they're going to get out of taxes is if they spend all that money expanding, which is going to generate more jobs. It's going to generate more revenue through building and expansion projects. I mean, it's supercharged the economy.
I agree with you. I don't have any issues with that. I understand what you're saying. I mean, sometimes there are differences about what can be expensed and what cannot, but that's another small rabbit hole that we don't need to go into.
Exactly, and I'd say the detailing on that can be. I mean, it's a pretty simple standard. It has to be an expense that's directly related to the operation of your business, which then trips on a company dime are not directly related to the operation of your company. Stuff like that. If you do, you know what I mean? Like it makes it pretty clear that it has to be a necessary expense for the operation of your business. You can detail some of that, point out some of the most garishly abused ones as being not exempted, and I think it'd be pretty easy to clean up. But by making it like 15%, we'd have one of the lowest tax markets in the world. So we're going to draw business and manufacturing from all over the world. We'll be able to put the people that we already have in our country to work in these other opportunities, because a lot of people would like to take on new career fields or do better jobs, but they can't afford to take time off to go to school, and it's almost impossible to work full time and go to school.
That's right.
Yeah. So if we incentivize the companies to pay for these people, and then they can have contracts. Well, hey, we train you. You stay on for 5 years. You don't have to pay for any of that training. Yeah, you know what I mean? It becomes a pretty clear way of it levels out the playing field. I'm not even huge on corporate taxes anyways, because of how complicated our supply chain is. But I don't think, as of yet, the American people are going to be ready for freeing corporations of their tax burden anyways.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for value-added taxes, where every step of the economic process, when you add value.
No, it's horrible. They do it all over Europe, and it's awful.
Okay.
So and then they just, well, because what's the problem with government? You give them a little bit and they take everything. So some of the VAT taxes on some categories in Europe, they took from a 10% VAT, and then on specific items it's 100%, 200%. You go to Scandinavia, most of those countries, it's 200% tax on owning a car or buying a house. It ends up putting it out of the price range for all except for the elites. Well, it's okay for them because they're in office to make sure that it stays that way, and it keeps their costs down with no competition. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough. I mean, all taxation is problematic at some level, but it's a question of which is the fairest mechanism that allows the least amount of intrusion of government in our lives, and
well, I can give a good example of that chain taxation. Fuel taxes is a great example. Okay, so first of all, any equipment done to mine raw resources use fuel. So the production of resources, taxed. Then it has to be transported to a refinery, taxed. Then it has to go from the refinery to a component manufacturer, taxed. Oh yeah, and all these other companies are being taxed on the energy that they use to operate. And then it goes to the final manufacturer of the final item, taxed. Then it has to be taken to the distributors, taxed. It has to be taken to the retailers, taxed. And then finally, you're taxed on your gas when you go to the store to buy it and go home. So that's like 6, 7, 8 taxes on every single item that gets repeated on the customer, because ultimately the consumer is the one that pays for all the costs of manufacturing and bringing an item to market, and you've now taxed them 7 times during the process. So a fuel tax is a repetitive tax on the individual.
Yeah, but the issue is that the taxes. So hopefully, the tax that consumers pay is certainly not larger than what they would pay today.
No, but my point is, so the consumer pays their tax, right? but they also pay the retailer's costs. So they're paying the retailer's tax for getting it to the store. They're paying the distributor's tax for getting it to the retailer. They're paying the manufacturer's tax for getting it to the distributor. They're paying the processor's tax for getting it to the manufacturer, and they're paying the producer or the miner's tax for getting it there. But all of those passed down to the customer. So if you remove thousands of dollars worth of tax in the process, those savings get back. Because when we talk about inflation, I mean that's a multiplication tax that goes all the way down the line, because the consumer pays all the costs for the entire supply chain.
I think I mean you're correct. The objectives are still the same, that the consumers pay only a limited amount of tax, and how we minimize the tax is the objective for all serious people. But the actual mechanism would then have to be evaluated to see which one works best, whether it's the one that we have today, that at the end point you just go pay 8.5% sales tax, or do you pay the difference only on the top level, and so on and so forth.
Well, I am okay with income taxes, but like certain loopholes would have to be taken out. Like consumption taxes unfairly tax the lower class because they spend a higher percentage of their income
Absolutely.
in comparison to the wealthy. However, if you're taxing income, okay, we can make that argument for taxing the income much easier. But then we have to get rid of like the billionaire loopholes, where a billionaire will go out, take a loan against their stock, and then have the company pay back the loan and write it off as a business expense. Meanwhile, the billionaire is getting millions of dollars tax free.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, all of the tax, the entire tax system is what should I word is ripe for corruption, and is ripe for undue involvement and all of that stuff from the government and the people who don't want to do the right things. And so it will need to be repealed in many ways. And so the tax on a purse card is sort of the first step in getting to the point where we eliminate undue interference and
yeah, I guess what I'm saying there is we need to get rid of taxes that replicate down the supply chain. So whether it's taxes on energy, extra taxes on real property, all this stuff is stuff that gets taxed onto the consumer over and over again, because the consumer pays for every tax that every business in the supply chain pays.
Yeah.
Like that's something we cannot get away from. But they never talk about it. When they talk about, like, when you hear these Democrats talking about like making corporations pay their fair share, corporations don't pay taxes. Their customers pay taxes.
Yes.
And so if you increase the taxes on a corporation, all you're doing is making the customer pay more.
Well, it's not clear to me whether the politicians of the left or the right are just economically illiterate, or whether they are just cynical about the fact that citizenry doesn't understand these issues, and so therefore they can say anything and get away with anything.
Yeah. In the meantime, they pass tax policy that, because of their strata, they're less affected by, but the people are impacted by, which leaves the people under more stress, which means them more likely to feel they need the government, which allows the government apparatus to continue to levy taxes on them to put them in an even worse situation.
But the problem we have is they are not punished at all for doing anything and saying anything at all today. Neither side is being punished.
Well, the number one problem is the spending. That's why they keep doing taxing, because they keep spending. So I personally have a proposal for a bill. If you get to Congress before me, I hope you would bring this up. And that is, any member of Congress who votes for a budget that spends more than we took in tax revenue the previous year is no longer eligible for re-election.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that one little law would ensure fiscal responsibility in perpetuity.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. I think this whole notion, and and there's lots of things too. We have been trained over the last 130 years to accept things from the government, to willingly ask for it, to request it, to accept it, and it's hard to. I mean, and this applies both to the left and the right. I mean, if you were to say, hey, let's phase out Social Security over the next 50 years so that all the current recipients get what they deserve, what they are expecting. But for everyone subsequently, it becomes less and less and less until the point where it's gone. But then people have been saving for themselves all this while, so they don't need Social Security at that point. But the
Exactly.
moment you say that, everybody, left and the right, will say not just no, but hell no.
So
So,
yeah,
so
and then
So it's
I
not just a
also
politician problem. I'm saying it's a problem for all American citizens, and that to me is where the fundamental attack needs to happen. Is we need to help our fellow Americans learn and understand what we are saying, and be able to say, just because it's coming to me doesn't make it right. And that's my sort of message. I've been talking to Republicans, Democrats, Independents in my campaigning. They all get it, and that's where we need to start. So all of these guys who get it say, you got it, you got my vote, and I'm going to vote for you. Well, the results will the results will
yeah.
tell how successful that is. But that's my approach to changing our country.
Well,
The people have to
and do you
change.
think the shrinking of the government is a big issue too? Because I mean, we do have, I mean, we've got what 500 members of Congress, but we also have 500 federal agencies, and when you break them down into their sub agencies spread out, you got over 5,000 government agencies. Then you got 90,000 like local jurisdictions. So most of those government agencies are overseeing things that are already overseen by local governments. So I think pulling back the federal government to the bounds that were originally set out in the Constitution would be a huge thing too,
No
because like
question.
we're trying to provide welfare to the people when that was never the duty of the government. The duty of the government was to promote welfare, which would mean a free market,
Yeah,
not to provide welfare for people that don't want to participate.
sure. I mean, I don't. We are not. We are talking about the same things, and
Yeah.
and the only thing I would add to that is it took us 130 years to get here, in my opinion, and it's not going to be done. We are not going to unwind it overnight, and so
So
we
do
go
you
ahead.
do you feel the argument that just claiming that a problem's big and it can't be solved overnight is an excuse not to try and solve it?
No, why, otherwise, why am I running? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
saying
Well, no,
use
because I
you.
say like the tax code's been ruined for 100 and some odd years. I mean, we never even had personal income tax until World War One, and then we got the wannabe president for life, Roosevelt, who tried to stack the Supreme Court that
Sure.
ran 4 elections. He did end up becoming president for life because he died in office. If he hadn't died, who knows what our country would look like now? And like all he did was keep handing out, and then that kind of like set into motion a spiral of spending at the federal level and overreach of the federal government, not promoting independent enterprise, but taking over independent enterprise. I mean, a great example is like government instituted flood insurance. Federal government shouldn't be in business. They shouldn't be providing power. They shouldn't be providing water, sewer, gas. They shouldn't be providing anything that the private market can provide, and generally more efficiently.
Well, sure. I
So
mean, all libertarians would agree with that.
yeah.
But my point is that we are not here in a shouting match with the
Mhm.
rest of the country. We have to bring them along with us to say, hey, we have been trained over the last 130 years ago to receive all these gifts, and thank you, Lord, for giving us those things. It is fundamentally wrong. And until and unless Americans get that at some level, we are not going to be able to solve this problem. you cannot send enough people in Congress to overturn anything. I mean, you can't even send me to Congress even for just a simple licensure law.
Yeah. No,
So,
I got
so,
you, but you got to start somewhere. And once
but you
you're in
have to
there, you can
start
start.
somewhere, and you
Yeah,
have
and
to.
once you're in there, you can start rabble rousing. Oh, Republicans, you say that you're all for reducing spending. So how about backing my law that if any member of Congress votes to spend more than we take in, they can't run for election again? Oh, you mean you don't care about the American people? You only care about your own reelection? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
that's when we start. That's when we start showing Republicans and Democrats for who they are, and start pushing them out and return to the multi-party system that our country was founded under.
Yeah, I
Now
mean,
there,
I like I said, we are in violent agreement, but again, I mean, um, um, I have, I have a healthy skepticism about anything being done overnight. But what we need to do is get one person in, two people in, three people in, do something, show the results of that, convert more people, because unless and until you have American people with you, the system's not going to change because they like it too much.
yeah, if you get the messaging right, the American people are going to be behind you when it comes to restoring their own finances, restoring their own liberty, restoring their prospects for the American dream.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you one other one, and I know it's like kind of a tightrope, uh, but federal policy on abortion. What do you think?
I'm fundamentally in a woman's right to choose camp. I mean, there may
Okay.
be restrictions on the margin, but again, I mean,
Now,
if
as
we,
I'm a libertarian too, and I just it's one of the platforms that I just cannot get behind that libertarians seem to have,
sure,
because I understand backing a woman's right to choose. The woman has the right to choose whether or not she has sex. She has the right to choose whether or not she uses birth control. She has the right to choose whether or not she takes the morning after pill now. So there's actually 15 choices that she makes before she's pregnant. So at that point, who's looking out for the baby's rights?
yeah,
So
and by the way,
it's a libertarian perspective I don't get, because the libertarian's ultimate view is to protect the liberty of the individual, particularly the liberty to life, and inconvenience is never a justification for ending of a life. So
sure.
it's now I what I was hoping for was that you would say, as a constitutionalist, it's none of the federal government's business.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what
Yeah.
I'm heading toward. It's none
Yeah.
of the
Okay.
government's business.
Yeah.
But also, just so you know, in full disclosure, where I stand, I mean, I think,
Yeah, well, I mean, the bottom line is, I mean, you look like you might be a day or two older than me, so then I know that damn good and well, like all the way back to Bill Clinton, nobody said that it wasn't a baby. Nobody said that it wasn't killing a baby, and by turning it into a woman's choice and ignoring the fact that it's killing a baby, which until 20 years ago nobody said it wasn't, like that's where the whole conversation got messed up. And like the arguments that people make is, well, you can have better economic prosperity. Well, that's not actually true. Families do better than people on their own. Um, and like, I mean, we need to incentivize. I mean, we
well,
talk about immigration needing people in this country. Well, how about instead of importing 1 million foreigners every year, we have 1 million extra babies? Because that's what we're killing now, is 1 million babies a year.
yeah. I mean, I don't. Again, I mean, I think um, certainly the libertarian that I am, I believe that it's every adult's choice to make, and
Okay.
I mean,
But don't you think that's contradictory? Because as a libertarian, you don't say that a person gets the right to kill another person.
but I mean, the issue is, again, we are now
We're
going into
dehumanizing.
metaphysics.
We're dehumanizing the baby to give the woman a right to kill it.
But I don't. I mean, I don't think so. Um, I don't think that women who are about to give birth to a baby make these decisions willy nilly as sort of a preventive um,
99% of abortions are performed for birth control reasons.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't know that, and I don't. Um, Certainly not at later stages. I would think not, but I
Okay.
don't know.
So now there's a little nomenclature here, like Trump, the one of the two main candidates. I mean, we already know Harris Walls are okay with stabbing babies in the head as they come down the birth canal. If we need evidence of that, we can look at the laws in California and the laws in Minnesota, which don't require the doctors provide medical care to the baby that's born after a botched abortion. So the same laws exist in California and Minnesota. So we know where they stand. On Trump's side, he says that he wouldn't do a federal abortion ban. But do you think federal level limitation to say first trimester would be reasonable?
Say that again. I missed something.
Do you think a limitation to abortion in the first trimester would be more reasonable? Not banning, because you can't call that a ban. When you say you're allowing something for up to 3 months, you have up to 3 months to make a decision.
Yeah. I mean, right. Again, I mean, we are talking about what's moral and what is the right thing to do. And I defer to a woman and her. It's between, for me, it's between a woman and her doctor to decide what is the best choice.
Okay, who's the advocate for the child?
For that child.
Who's the advocate for the child?
So the woman herself is the parents are. I mean,
the parent that's trying to kill the baby is not the advocate for the child. So the federal government at that. Okay, so let me put it this way. Okay, the baby can't survive on its own. Okay, well, a 3-year-old can't survive on their own. Are we going to now make it a woman's right to choose if they kill their baby at 3? No, of course not, because the federal government limits what people can do to people that can't take care of themselves. Correct?
Well, I think we are talking about convincing each other of things that are.
I'm just looking for some quantification. You keep saying a woman's right to choose, so you're okay with a woman at 9 months going into labor, committing abortion.
Those are.
That's a yes. Okay. So, anyways, that's not libertarian. So you need to do some soul searching on that one. The rest of the conversation, I enjoy talking with you, but like advocating for babies to die because their mom decides to kill them. That's not good. But I do like that you think that the federal government shouldn't be involved, because constitutionally it does say anything not covered in the Constitution is states' rights. And we have a massive bloated federal government because the federal government keeps poking its nose in things that the Constitution didn't give it a right to. So I think that's where we can at least agree on that.
Yeah.
So
clearly.
I'm actually A-okay with the heartbeat law that they have here in Texas. And you could have made this argument 20 years ago, but there's the morning after pill. You can buy it in any pharmacy.
They're even thinking of banning that. Where is that justice?
I've never seen any serious proposal to ban it. The banning of the morning after pill is not going to happen.
Okay, well,
like I mean, you can't say, oh well, they're thinking about and use that as a justification for a much worse act. You know what I mean? Like, atrocities are committed throughout history with justification of it's for the good of the people. Like, don't forget, the Holocaust happened because Hitler said it was for the good of the people.
Okay.
Am I wrong? So now I'm gonna add in one other point. If abortion was so well and good, why are 99% of abortion clinics in Black and brown communities?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I think.
Why are 99% of abortion clinics in Black and brown communities?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if they are. I don't know if there are.
They are.
I just
That's
don't know.
Almost every Planned Parenthood, who's the main producer of abortions in the United States, are in Black and brown communities. And this is an organization that was founded by a woman who wanted birth control so Black and brown people wouldn't breed. So that's where my high level of skepticism on the abortion issue comes into play. And then the dehumanizing role of a decentralized government far, far away, something that the founding fathers talked about at great length. It's the reason why we have the system of checks and balances. It's the reason why the Senate was supposed to be elected by the state houses, and the representatives were directed by popular vote, and there was no other democracy throughout the system, because people should not be dictating how people live their lives in different states. I hate the laws in Minnesota and California, but I also respect the right to put those laws into place under the Constitution of the United States. You follow what I'm saying? Now that being said, I do think that there has to be some level of restriction, and this idea that it's a woman's right to choose, that's absolutely BS, because the federal government regulates all kinds of medical treatments that can be provided. And a medical treatment that specifically has the purpose of ending a life, you say you can avoid that because of a woman's right to choose, and yet we tell cancer patients what drugs they can and can't try. We tell diabetics what drugs they can and can't take. During that big thing happened with that thing from the place that everybody had to deal with for too many years, and you can't say on YouTube without getting ripped off. That thing, they told everybody what they needed to do, including doing mandates. So the idea of telling people, oh, it's their own choice, the government's involved in every medical decision you make, and to even suggest that they aren't is disingenuous. So, and then I think again we have an unequal protection clause under the law, because if the woman doesn't want a baby, she can have an abortion. If the man doesn't want a baby, doesn't matter, he has to support it until it's 18. So that the one side or the other has to be balanced, because it's not equal. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I mean,
yeah,
I think
that you can't argue that that's fair. If the woman wants to have a baby and the man doesn't, the man has to support that child until it's 18. If the man wants to have the baby and the woman doesn't, the woman can kill it.
Well, I don't want to argue with you about this, because
that's not an argument. I'm asking if you think that's equal protection under the law. So the point I'm making, the child support laws exist to protect the child, yet our abortion laws ignore the child. So I'm just.
But the child is born. I mean, it's for me, it's really simple. The child is born. They have.
Oh no, you can end up with child support while the mother's still pregnant in some states. Usually the same states that say the mother can stab the baby in the head up to 9 months.
All right, I think I don't have anything.
Yeah. So I mean, I had to give one topic that was going to be contentious, because I, for the most part, on your policies, agree with you. This is one I knew I wasn't going to, so we had to have something that we're going to disagree on. I can at least support your position that it's not the federal government's business, and that they shouldn't be involved. It is a state issue. And then at the state level, if you want to ensure a right to abortion, then elect legislators that are going to reflect your values. And that's that on that. I do appreciate you coming on. We'll go ahead and wrap this. We've been an hour, and I know you're in the final days trying to get out some votes to get it done. I do appreciate you sitting down and talking with me and letting people hear what you think. And I'll forward you some of the clips after I make clips. But yeah, I do appreciate you joining me. That's one of the most contentious topics in America, and yet people try and shut down conversation over it. So that's why I specifically went into it, because you get oh, well, you hate women, or oh, you're killing babies, but the conversation's never had to where both sides look at both perspectives. So I do appreciate you even tolerating the part where it's a little tougher. It was intentional. We also get to see how you're going to stand if you get into Congress, that you are going to stand by your beliefs and what your values are. And no better way to do that than have a discussion on something where we know we disagree, and you get an opportunity to push back for what you believe in. So I hope you see the point of that. It wasn't to mock or ridicule your position on abortion. It was to prove that if you get in, you're going to be a man in integrity that fights. So if you guys want to get out of the the dichotomy here of the Republican Democrat system that our founding fathers never intended to do. Again, we have an alternative in Texas, 37th congressional district over there by Austin. We've got Girish Altekar, and he'd be a great option over Democrats and Republicans that we already know what they're going to do in Congress, which is toe the party line. So any last words that you want to throw out there, Girish, before we call it a day here?
No, visit my website, and it's girishaltekar.com, and I look for your support in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I've gone through his website. I knew all of his positions before we even had the conversation, because he clearly states his positions on his website. Go and check it out. I mean, we had a limited amount of time to cover what he believes in. So if you go check it out, you'll see everything. I believe that the libertarians stand where most Americans are on both sides, and the Republicans and Democrats have done everything they can to divide us into two camps, because it's easier to control us if we're fighting against each other instead of fighting for ourselves. So thanks again, Girish, and you have a great day. Good luck on the election. I'm actually going to vote tomorrow. Unfortunately, you're not in my district. We don't have a libertarian candidate over here. That's why I said 2026. I'm going to come take this away from Pete Sessions, but you have a great afternoon, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, so that's a wrap from him. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And again, we're going to be back here in about another hour. I've got another interview lined up. So we're going to keep going with these interviews all the way until the election. And then afterwards, I plan to continue the interview format. Our next interview is going to be with Darren Hamilton at 3 p.m. And let me double check here. I don't want to say the wrong race because I have so many interviews scheduled. Let's see which race he's in. Darren Hamilton. He's going to be the 24th congressional district. Let's see here. And he is actually where is he here? So he is the libertarian candidate for that district. So we're going to get to hear from another libertarian in the next interview at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening. But make sure you come back for the next interview.